Today, we welcome to the program Garlin Gilchrist, the Lieutenant Governor of Michigan and also Democratic candidate for Governor of Michigan. It's so great to have you on. We had the governor on several weeks ago and talked both about what's happening in Michigan. We talked a little bit about her recent controversies involving the President of the United States. And I think this is a great opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the nuts and bolts of what folks in Michigan are experiencing right now. So I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. And, nothing but controversy surrounds this president. And frankly, but like the damage that he is doing to people practically in Michigan, to our economy in Michigan, and also the damage he does principally to just how we think of ourselves as Americans. What is it? What does the rule of law mean? Like he's a deeply, deeply dangerous and problematic person. I mean, just even the announcements last night with these travel bans from Middle Eastern and African countries. I mean, that deeply impacts the state of Michigan. We have the largest population of people from Arab American countries and Middle East in the country here in the Detroit area, actually, cities like Dearborn and Dearborn Heights and Melvindale, and that directly impacts people and their families. It's just really problematic.
One of the things I think is really interesting about Michigan, and this is a generalization, but that I think is representative of something interesting in the Democratic Party, which was when we looked, for example, at the 2020 primary. And if you looked on Reddit and Twitter, it seemed as though there was a lot more support, for example, for like a Bernie Sanders than maybe there was. And I say this as someone who supported Bernie, and ultimately, when it became clear he wouldn't be the nominee, I supported Joe Biden. One of the things I think is interesting about Michigan is a place where you have manufacturing is important, union work is important, and there's this idea of the Democrats who are not as caught up in the internet milieu, but are really going to work, putting food on the table for their family, evaluating who's the best candidate for me, voting in that way, and then kind of getting back to work. And my interpretation in 2020 was that this is a slightly more moderate Democratic Party in Michigan than maybe you see on Reddit and Twitter. Is my interpretation or assessment accurate in your estimation?
To sum this up in one sentence, you're like, the internet is not real life. And so I understand that. I'm saying that look, I'm a software entrepreneur and a tech guy. So that's like the irony of me saying that. I think that if you actually talk to people in Michigan, they are very practical about problem solving and what their challenges are and who's going to speak to the energy, the frustration that they have. And I'm saying it's
Mm.
like, you ain't got to apologize. I voted for Bernie in the Democratic primary in Michigan too. That's okay. I've been all over Michigan. We have 83 counties across our two peninsulas. We're the largest state physically east of the Mississippi River. I've been all the 83 counties at least 3 times. I talk to people for real who live in Michigan, who work in Michigan, who raise their kids every day. And these voters are not ideological, but what they are like, what is happening for me and my community? Who is going to help me see a future and a pathway for me to be more successful, for my kids to be more successful? How the hell am I going to be able to afford to send my kids to daycare, to send my kids to college, to get them prepared for a career? And they want someone who's really going to speak to that energy. And so I do think it is important that everything that we do, everything that we say, every policy that we put forward, every policy we defend, we need to be grounded in those conversations with actual people. And so that's what's driven me as
Hmm.
lieutenant governor, is to say that, I am with where the people are. And so that's where my heart is going to be. And so therefore, with the energy or the passion or the fire that I have for this president, for the way he's doing absolute damage and destruction to our manufacturing sector, the way that he is, scaring educators out of the field, like that is catastrophic for our state's future and our community's future, because people tell me that every single day.
Yesterday, we spoke to the governor of New Jersey, a state where the margin of victory for Kamala Harris in 2024 was a fraction of what it was for President Biden in 2020 and for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Michigan's situation actually was going completely back into the Trump column in the presidential election in November of 2024. What's your interpretation of that? What do you make of that?
I think people wanted to know that whoever they were going to support was as pissed off about the status quo as they were, that things weren't working for them. They weren't getting the results they needed, or certainly they weren't getting the results they needed fast enough.
Hmm.
And even progress was happening. And so that's part of why, again, in my conversations, how I come forward is as like, I'm an engineer. Like, I'm not a lawyer like most of these other political people. Like, I'm an engineer, problem solver, someone who wants to get in there and listen to people and then build a solution and make a system work for people. And when people are frustrated with the system, they want someone to either change the system or set the system on fire. We need to make changing more attractive than the destruction that Donald Trump offered. And we didn't do that in as compelling of a way because people didn't see us matching their energy. But
And
that is,
do you put that, just to be clear, do you put that on feelings about what Joe Biden had done in the preceding 4 years, or feelings about what candidate Harris was offering, or a combination of the two?
I don't think it's one or the other. I mean, I think it's, and I also don't know that it's specifically even just about the 4 years of the Biden administration. I mean, if you look at, for example, the way that we have pursued, the way we pursue free trade hasn't worked out that great for a lot of people in the state of Michigan. As far as like, seeing jobs go to Mexico, to see manufacturing facilities close, to see plants turn down shifts, things like that. Like that hasn't really worked well. We need to be able to sell stuff all over the world, but we got to do it in a way that makes sure that supports our jobs. Now, what I also see though here in Michigan is that folks do not believe there's no coherence with Trump's approach to this, right? Like he's not doing things that are actually going to grow our economy or make sure that people can actually create those jobs here in Michigan. And so they have seen that and are like, man, we actually didn't get what he was selling. He's not giving us what he was selling because he's a liar. And so now our opportunity though is to offer a vision that says, we have seen that this system isn't working for you. Let's make it work. Let's build something that creates so that Michigan, for example, can make the things that matter going forward, whether it's in mobility, whether it's in chips or whatever it needs to be, that we can prepare our people to take advantage of that so that you can see a pathway for our communities to not just reindustrialize, but again, make the things that matter going forward.
On the manufacturing jobs, we hear all of this talk about reshoring and bringing supply chains back home. And of course, that's something countries can do. In a lot of these industries, it would take around a decade to actually do it by the time you build the capacity and plants are up and running and hiring. Okay. But one of the things that's missing from the conversation when the president just kind of flippantly says that is that we have 500,000 available manufacturing jobs in the United States right now. Now, a fraction of those are in Michigan. They're not all in Michigan, but some of them are. What is your explanation for why those jobs are going unfilled? Some ideas that are floated are, well, the wages being offered simply aren't attractive enough for the work, or there's the perception by some that these are not jobs that Americans, quote, want to do. What if we have this many open jobs right now, that really puts a question mark around the reshoring. But what is your thought as to why these jobs are remaining open?
Yeah, I don't think about it necessarily in terms of reshoring. Again, what I think about in terms of, what do we need to make and build going forward, and how can we make sure our people are best positioned for that? And one of those reasons, when you talk to the companies and people who are hiring for those jobs, what they'll say is, we need people with particular sets of skills and
Mm.
credentials, and we need to make sure that we're supporting an education and a training system that can give people those credentials. Now, I've asked those employers to therefore put some skin in the game. We'll put up some resources and partner with us so that we can, as a state, for example, make sure Michiganders have those skills. And we've seen some progress on that. Like now we, guarantee community college for every kid that's graduated from high school in the state of Michigan starting last school year. So like the kids I spoke at Oak Park High School, just outside of Detroit, all those kids can go to community college for free, tuition free if they want to. We also have stuff for people in different points of their career. We've sort of targeted certain sectors where we know a lot of those openings are and ask those employers to come to the table. What are the things that you actually need? What does a person need to be successful in this job? And then help us work with our education systems to design programs to meet that. So the first thing I hear about is, yes, we have these openings, but these openings require particular things. And we haven't seen the scale of people who have matched those credentials to get it done. So they need to do the work to make sure they pay enough. They need to do the work to make sure they have benefits and are good jobs that are respectable. And we need to make sure we're positioning people for that success. So I think we have to do multiple things in order to make this work. But the last thing I'll say is really important, that again, this is less about like recreating something that was in the past.
Right.
This needs to be forward looking about what are the industries that are going to be most important to the country and to the world. And how can we make sure that America and Americans are positioned to lead in those industries? And that is certainly true of the state of Michigan. So, what can we build? How do we prepare people to build those? How do we prepare people to start those businesses and take those jobs? And that is where our focus is. That is where my focus is. And that's just because, look, I'm an engineer who's always looking forward. So I was looking for how do we make sure we're positioned to, to do what Wayne Gretzky said, which is skate where the puck is going. And that's what we got to do to lead.
I want to dig now even further into manufacturing, specifically into automotive.
Yeah.
Now, I come to you with these questions because I think you know more about it than I do. My understanding is that the framework that was established by USMCA during Donald Trump's first term encouraged the manufacturing in tandem between Canada, US, and Mexico. In other words, let's bring it into these three countries from further out and reward that. But my understanding is that the blanket tariffs now that involve Canada and Mexico would actually punish the companies that did what USMCA was meant to encourage. Is my interpretation correct? And talk a little bit about how this will all affect automotive in Michigan.
So your interpretation is pretty much on point. And frankly, what it represents, though, to even zoom out a little bit, David, is that, you know, Trump calls himself a deal maker, but clearly the deals that he makes are like worth toilet paper, man. Like, I mean, you talk about USMCA was a deal that he crafted,
Yeah.
that he cut, but now it's something that he is absolutely undermining. And so these businesses who employ a lot of people in the state of Michigan are now like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like we worked with you to get this deal, we complied with it, and now
Right.
you're yanking the chair from under us. So it just shows to how untrustworthy and incompetent this man and his team are. They're not committed to the success of Michiganders. They're not committed to the success of this industry. I don't know what their goals are. They haven't really even articulated them. So I think what we are trying to provide, at least at the state level, is to say, look, for the instability and calamity that you're getting out of Washington, we want to give you a different kind of energy here in the state of Michigan. We'll be your partner to go and to try to negotiate and advocate to make sure you have a seat at the table to get the clarity that you need to plan because for their lack of planning when they can't plan, it means they can't put shifts on for Michiganders. It means that people can't put food on the table. It means that people can't send their kids to a summer camp now to be coming into the summer. There are real practical implications of that and to those choices being made by this administration.
I want to talk a little bit about your engineering and tech background that you mentioned. You know, one of the funny things in politics is that candidates and elected officials, no matter what their background is, say that their background is really well suited to the job that they either have or are trying to get. And one of the interesting things is Vivek Ramaswamy has talked up his background as a startup entrepreneur tech guy. Elon Musk, we were told, his background makes him perfectly suited to figure out what's wasteful in government, where's the fraud and abuse, let's find it, let's fire these people, lay these others. It all has kind of imploded, right? So one of the things that I think is clear is that background is interesting, but how it's applied to the job of government is maybe the more critical part. So talk a little bit about that, because while I've said we need more than just lawyers as elected officials, there's no doubt about it. We need more than just like big business, people like a Mark Wayne Mullen type. We need to go further, but that's not a guarantee that a different background is necessarily suited to the job, if you know what I mean.
100%. What it means is for me, look, as a kid who, got a computer when I was 5 years old, who was a software engineer at Microsoft and started and sold two technology companies, all that means is that as an engineer, my job is to make systems work for people.
Hmm.
The difference between what Elon Musk did to the federal government is when they say efficiency, all they mean is firing people and breaking things.
Right.
What I am focused on as my engineering is about effectiveness, how to make something actually work for people, deliver value for people, to create something that they can depend on and trust and rely on. They are using technology and technology skills to break people's trust, to make things not work for people or to only work for a few or for them personally, which is what I see with Musk. They're trying to get this data to feed into his own AI system.
Yeah.
And I think So for me here and for Michigan, in a state that has made the things that mattered for a century, understanding sort of where technology is going and how we can make sure that we're positioned to make things that matter going forward. Because these changes, whether it's, artificial intelligence and large language models, they're going to have a tremendous influence on our education system and on our economy going forward. And I don't want Michiganders to be left out or left behind. I want us to lead. And so I think having a leader who can understand those things, who's not intimidated by, who when these companies come in and try to have a meeting with me, I'm going to be able to call them when they try to lie to me and tell me something that's not true. I think we need someone with that kind of credibility in the room. But you must connect that to the actual experiences of people. And so when I spend time on the ground all over the state of Michigan, or when I think about my own kids, again, my twins who are graduating from the sixth grade and my baby girl's graduating from kindergarten, when I talk to their friends as parents, their education professionals who are in front of them, needing to be grounded in those experiences so that they can trust that I'm going to be the person who's going to have them in the room with me when we are doing the things to do and negotiating what we need to negotiate from a policy standpoint, a program standpoint, and even a practice standpoint for how we do things in Michigan. That's what the next governor, I think, of our state needs to be able to do. As a governor, it's different than a legislator or like a senator, right?
Right.
Like your job is not to sort of be sort of one voice in this cacophony that is, the U.S. Capitol. It's to be someone who can deliver for people and stand for our values and get things done. And that's what engineers and problem solvers do, is make things that are effective for people. And I've delivered results like that on the issues that matter across the state of Michigan. And I'll do that continuing going forward as governor.
Yeah, listen, not to make technology and technocracy the number one thing, but if you saw some of those hearings with the TikTok CEO and you saw the caliber of the questions that were being asked by people who clearly did not even understand what they were asking, scary stuff. That is becoming a growing core competency, I think, for anyone who wants to be taken seriously in the political space.
That's right. And look, there's work to do. But I think you have a lot of people who are ready to step up and step in a way because frankly, they're like me. They're offended that they've seen people just bastardize what it means to have technical competency and use it to hurt people. Well, I'm not doing this to do anything but position people for success, to position our communities for success. And so using those powers for good, I think is what we need to think about.
We've been speaking with Michigan's Lieutenant Governor Garlin Gilchrist, who's also running for governor in the state of Michigan. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, David.